You know, I never record my immediate reaction after I watch a movie, but this time I did. Once I got into my car and I started driving home, this is what I had to say about Twisters.
We got twins! Twins!
Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Lee Isaac Chung's Twisters. This movie stars Edgar-Jones, Glen, Powell, Anthony Ramos, along with a whole bunch of other people that round out the ensemble that is Twisters. And, you know, I will say that I was not necessarily too excited going into this movie based on the original trailer for it, because I guess to give a little context for me and my love for the original film Twister, that film, along with SpongeBob, Drake and Josh, Power Rangers, and the Star Wars prequels, and Twister, all those films and TV shows were just on constant loop in my household when I was a kid. And so I had seen Twister a countless amount of times. I know that film like the back of my hand. And so when I saw that first trailer for Twisters, it just looked like a shot-for-shot remake of a film that I absolutely love. And when it comes to, sequels after many years or remakes or whatever it is, if it's just a shot-for-shot remake of something that I already love, it's just gonna feel really dull and uninspired to me. And so yeah, I wasn't too excited going to this movie, despite it having a very talented filmmaker with Lee Isaac Chung, who directed Minari, which I loved, and Edgar-Jones, who is great in Fresh, and Glen Powell, who's just phenomenal in Hitman, which I just reviewed recently, and then Anthony Ramos, who's great in The Heights, and just there's so many things about this movie that should add up to be something that's just a really fun blockbuster to watch in the summer, and to my surprise, that's exactly what it is. And so I will be talking about spoilers for Twisters, and I'm very excited to get into all the little details, all the similarities that I saw to the original, both the benefits of that and the pitfalls of those similarities. And so if you have not seen the film, go check it out, come back here, and let's talk about Twisters. Alright, so let's get into my negatives that I have with this film first, just to get it out of the way, and that is mainly the structure of this film being pretty much identical to that of the original film. And by that I mean you start off with a main character who has a traumatic past with tornadoes where she lost a loved one. You have a rival group of storm chasers to add tension amongst the characters. You have a sequence with multiple tornadoes, twins in this film's case, whereas the first film you had triplets. A scene where the characters go home for character building and bonding amongst the characters. You have a nighttime sequence with a surprise tornado that tears through a drive-in / rodeo in this film's case. You have a final chase sequence with an F5 tornado where the characters accomplish their goal in a successful test of their new technology that they have just created, and it all culminates in the characters, getting together in the end. And so this movie has the exact same structure as that original film, and to be fair, that original film has an energy to it and has a pace to it that is really entertaining. I think that you can say the same thing about this film, but I couldn't help but notice that every single turn that this movie made is something that I've technically seen before. And the result of all that leads to this film feeling like an extremely safe sequel, which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think having the same structure, adds a lot to this film in terms of the original film had a great pace to it. So this film also has a really great pace to it. There's a lot of tornadoes and a lot of action in this film like there was in the original one. But I think what you lose is the lightning in a bottle type of, surprise that the first movie was, because that movie is extremely intense. The stakes feel very high and the characters are very fun and entertaining to watch. And although yes, the characters are very fun and entertaining to watch in this film, I didn't necessarily feel the same sense of stakes and fear against tornadoes that I did watching that original one, especially since I'm older now, and tornadoes were genuinely scary when I was a kid when I lived in Colorado. And although tornadoes didn't happen all too often in Colorado, there was so many tornado warnings just all the time, and so there was that sense of stakes and fear when I watched that movie as a kid. But if you strip away all those things that make this film feel derivative of that first film, you have some characters in here that are really great to see. And when you have both of these movies that have a giant ensemble of people, there's a lot of side characters in both of these films. I think what both of the films do really well is you have all these little small characters with great character actors playing these people that all have memorable character quirks that make the world feel a little bit larger than what you see in the main cast of characters. A lot of really great quirks. I think Perea is a great example of a character that is extremely over the top and goofy, and his character quirks in here, screaming twins, we got twins, and all the iconic lines that he's for sure going to have walking out of this film. He was just such an energy and such a joy to watch on screen in the same way that's, Philip Seymour Hoffman was in the original film. And so, yeah, even all these side characters and all the, little quirks that you have in the background of this film are extremely entertaining like that first film was. And I also really love David Corenswet in this film as well, who's going to be our new Superman in James Gunn's Superman movie that we get next year. And yes, he was in Pearl a couple years ago, and so these are the two films that I have at least a reference for his acting abilities for. And I thought he did a great job doing kind of an impression of Henry Cavill's Superman in this film, being a character with absolutely no empathy for humanity whatsoever. And so it's going to be great to see how he does the opposite character once you get to see James Gunn's Superman movie, which even the set leaks that you see him, saving people feels very fresh and new when it comes to Superman. At least we haven't seen that since like either the early 2000s or like the 70s and 80s. But I really love that this character was kind of the Cary Elwes character that was in the original film, and I thought that was going to be Glen Powell's character just based off of the trailer, so I'm glad that they did something a little bit different with that. Somebody that I wasn't expecting to see here, and I thought this character played a really great foil specifically for Anthony Ramos's character and his arc that we'll get into in a second here. But really our main trio is with Daisy Edgar-Jones, Glen Powell, and Anthony Ramos. So let's start off with Daisy first, because she is the character that you start off this film with at the very beginning of the film, the Helen Hunt of this movie who loses somebody close to her at the very beginning of this movie. And it's different. It's not her as a child losing her father this time around. She is a college student working on a science project that's going to, get her to complete her degree. She has a very strong passion for storm chasing. I think maybe in the original script her mom might have been Helen Hunt, and maybe Helen Hunt didn't want to come back to this world. She's with a group of friends and her boyfriend chasing down this tornado, and she's using the Dorothy technology from the first film, which I think is the only real direct connection this film has to the original film, it was nice to see Dorothy have a role, at least a small role, in this opening scene. But the real mission here is to have this polymer be sucked up into the tornado to try to absorb the moisture in the sky, to try to dissolve the tornado before it can become a bigger disaster in this, in this entire situation with this giant storm. And that is essentially the science that this character is trying to accomplish, whereas the first film was just trying to get data that you've never been able to get by having the little beads fly up in the sky and to track all the data from the tornado. And so there's always going to be some scientific elements that they're going to have to base off of why they're chasing these storms in the first place. Of course, things go wrong. This tornado was actually an F5 scale tornado instead of the smaller scale, the one that she had, enough polymer for. And so it goes into a giant disaster essentially, and all her friends are killed except for Anthony Ramos, who is out separately with the data in the truck. And then you have her, go into an underpass and her boyfriend gets blown away. And it's a very tragic thing that caused her to essentially abandon Anthony Ramos's character to move to New York and to give up on her dream of chasing tornadoes. And you can tell that her passion in all this stuff is just, it's lost. And when you lose a passion for something that you truly love, it really is heartbreaking to follow. And I really love how they had this character deal with the trauma of what happened in her past and her cold feet essentially of, flying back for a week to do this all again to help Anthony Ramos's character to, use his new scientific way to track the data and to essentially get a model of it in 3D space with these other panels. And that's kind of what, draws her back into this world. But again, she has cold feet getting into these dangerous situations because of the trauma from that event 5 years prior. And this is where you meet Glen Powell's character, who is in a different group of storm chasers. And that group is more so similar to the group that we followed in that original film, that are more the hillbilly type of characters who are a little bit off. They are a little bit out of their minds. And, they have a very specific reason as to why they're chasing tornadoes, which I'll get into in a second here. But what really was surprising to me is the fact that Daisy Edgar-Jones is in the side, at least at the beginning of the movie, of the Cary Elwes team, the team that has, funding behind them, the group that has the money and the technology to do all these fancy things, whereas the characters that have less funding, that are more, run and gun and wild, like, our original group was with Helen Hunt's crew, you have, the Glen Powell character, who is the more wild one that feels like it's going to be the antagonist that Cary Elwes was in that original film. And so this movie does do a good job at kind of flipping the script and showing a different perspective of this world. And as you progress and as Daisy Edgar-Jones gets to know Glen Powell a little bit more, and as these characters' worlds start to clash and they realize that, the group that Daisy Edgar-Jones is with David Corenswet and with Anthony Ramos may not be the right one, because the person that they're getting these funding from is really somebody that takes advantage of these disasters to, gain their own, property taxes and to gain all the power that they need to take advantage of these situations. Where Glen Powell's character is a lot more empathetic than you see at first glance, because when you see Glen Powell in this film, and the reason why I wasn't really excited for this character in this movie is it looked like Glen Powell was playing the type of character that Glen Powell gets typecast in all the time, which is a really arrogant and cocky and just like the guy with a really punchable face type of character that he played in Top Gun Maverick, and he played in a lot of other films prior to this one. But as you get to know this character, like Daisy Edgar-Jones' character is getting to know him, you can't help but to fall in love with this character because he does have a lot more empathy. He runs this YouTube channel where he runs into tornadoes and does all these really stupid things that his subscribers want him to do, like shoots fireworks up into the tornado, which is completely ridiculous, but it looked cool in the film. And so you, on first glance, you really are judging this character in the same way that the characters are judging him for being really wild. But once you get into an actual disaster where a tornado tore through this town, and you get to see that's, all the money that they make off of selling their t-shirts, off of selling their mugs, all the AdSense money that they're making on their YouTube channel, which, side note, also, if you are on YouTube or if you know how YouTube's AdSense program works, you know that with just 1 million subscribers, there's no way in hell that they make make enough money to sustain the type of things that they do in this film with the technologies that they have and the resources and the amount of people that they have working for them. There's no way in hell, but that's all besides the point, because all the money that they do make is going back to the people of the town that was just, ravaged through all these things. They're giving them free food, they're giving them, just help and support, they're going out to find their lost dogs. They're very empathetic people, and again, when you look at them at a glance, when you're just looking at them from afar and they seem like these wild characters that are just, being dumb and driving into a tornado and shooting fireworks into it, they are really good people at the core of it. And so as you get to know Glen Powell's character and as you fall in love with him in the same way that, Daisy Edgar-Jones' character is falling in love with him, it just makes a much more interesting story. And this adds a lot of conflict between Daisy Edgar-Jones and Anthony Ramos' character, because when they have that falling out and she realizes who he's working for and the fact that he kind of sold out to, have the money and resources to do what he loves rather than doing the run and gun type of thing that they were doing when they were younger, the passion of the actual science and the passion of the actual, event itself of storm chasing, you have that divide between these characters, and you have Anthony Ramos go through an arc where he, realizes things that he's done wrong, and he quits his job and he abandons David Corenswet in the streets, which I imagine he then does a great impression of, Pa Kent in Man of Steel as well. He probably gets, thrown away in the tornado. You never really get to see those characters again, but either way, I do think that arc and that realization with that character was all worth it. And I thought these dynamics that they have between Anthony Ramos and Daisy Edgar-Jones and Glen Powell's character, I thought all of those dynamics were really interesting in this film. And all this culminates in one giant, third act action sequence where you have a giant F5 tornado tearing through this small little town. You have all the characters stuck in this movie theater that is just being torn apart, and Daisy Edgar-Jones' character can only do one thing, and that is to try to, accomplish the scientific project that she had been working on as a college student. And even though she doesn't have enough polymer to dissipate a tornado at this scale, she's going to try it anyway. And she takes, Glen Powell's truck that has these drills to drill into the ground to try not to get sucked into this giant tornado, and she tries to pull it off all by herself, which I thought was an extremely brave thing for this character to do. And I think the arc of going from where she started at with a character who put her friends in a very dangerous situation that got them all killed in order for her to accomplish this science project, to at the very end of it use that science to save another group of friends from that very same fate that her old group of friends faced, I thought was a very, brave arc of her, going from somebody who was very terrified of these tornadoes at the beginning of the story to braving it out by the end of it. And yes, everything that I'm saying here does sound absolutely ridiculous, and I know that, and that's the fun nature of these Twisters movies, because yes, all this is ridiculous. There's a lot of great lines in the first one, a lot of great cheesy moments of the 90s action that was in that first one that translates into this film, where you have these characters talk about tornadoes as if they have a consciousness, as if these tornadoes have a personal vendetta and are actively, hunting them down throughout the entirety of this film, which I thought was funny every time they had lines like, oh, the tornado, they're coming for us, or they're coming back, they're coming around to us, or whatever they say about the tornadoes. It is extremely cheesy and extremely fun, and I had a smile on my face the entire time that I was watching it. And yes, the science of this, the mumbo jumbo that they speak of how this polymer is going to dissipate the tornado through pulling the moisture out from the clouds, I don't know if any of that has any real basis in science. Honestly, I highly doubt it, but it made enough sense in this movie alone for me to be like, hell yeah, you go ahead and you drive into that tornado and you dissipate it with these things, and you use these firework cannons to also, throw some stuff up into the cloud, into the tornado, to also help the science project do what it needs to do. It is ridiculous, but again, it is infused with that 90s style of dumb action that I really love. And although this movie may not be my favorite movie of the summer, and yes, I do like it a little bit less than the original Twisters movie because I have a lot of nostalgia for that, even though that movie is quite frankly even more ridiculous. I think there's more tornadoes in the original film. The whole storyline with the divorce is a very 90s way of looking at divorce, where Hollywood didn't really know any other way to resolve a divorce situation besides the couple magically coming back together in the end of it. And the Melissa character in the original was treated so just hilariously cruel in that first film that I just can't help but to laugh at that entire storyline in the first film. But there's that nostalgia, there's the stakes, there's the characters, and there's the Bill Paxton and the Helen Hunt nature of that first film that I thought was so brilliant towards this film. I thought Glen Powell and Daisy Edgar-Jones and their romance in here was also really fun to watch. It's not as iconic as that of the original film, but I did love how this film resolved with them kind of hinting at them getting back together at the airport. I love Glen Powell, probably, causing so many just crimes, essentially drilling those holes into the airport ground in order to, run over to Daisy Edgar-Jones in a very 90s, cheesy romance type of way. It's ridiculous, but I love it anyway. And so, yes, this movie may not be my favorite movie this summer. It may not be, my favorite movie in terms of the Twisters franchise, I guess now. But it is still just a really fun movie to watch at the theater that I honestly would recommend, which again, I'm surprised that I'm recommending this movie considering that I wasn't too excited going into this film based on the trailers and based on the marketing alone. But here I am proving myself wrong and just having a fun time watching tornadoes tear through the towns, the small towns in the fields of Oklahoma, and watching characters shoot fireworks up them. It's ridiculous, it's fun, but it's worth it. So that's going to be my review for Twisters. Did you guys have a chance to check it out in theaters this weekend, or did I convince you to go ahead and watch this movie? Let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you did enjoy this review, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment down below all your thoughts on it. I have a bunch more reviews that I have on the channel, like my Acolyte series, which I just wrapped up. I just talked about The Boys also on the channel. I loved the new season of the show, and I'm very excited to talk about that also in another video. And I'm also going to be watching this movie called ADDY tonight, the new horror film that I really know nothing about, that I'm curious to see what it's all going to be about. So I'm also going to have a review out for that later on this weekend. But that's going to be it for me, and I hope to see you all in my next one.